In this video, we're going to be covering Mexican independence. We're going to be talking about the wars for independence that took place when Mexico broke free from the colonial rule of the Spanish Empire. To start things off, let's look at one of the central figures of the wars for independence, a priest by the name of Miguel Hidalgo y Costilla. Hidalgo was not your ordinary priest. In fact, he was somewhat of a rebel. He did things that priests normally wouldn't do at this time, such as reading books that were prohibited by the Spanish government. Right? I mean, there wasn't freedom of expression or freedom of speech in the Spanish Empire at this time. So certain books, if they had radical ideas, would be banned. And you were not supposed to read those books. But Hidalgo was known to read such books because he was open to radical ideology. He was also known to have a pretty good time. He liked to go dancing and gambling, right? Things that priests would not usually do during this time. And he also was known to challenge authority, figures of authority, such as the Pope and even the Spanish king, right? He's quoted as calling the Spanish king a tyrant. All right, so speaking out against the Spanish king. This is a priest doing this. And the Pope, who he's supposed to be loyal to, right? The Pope is supposed to be infallible, meaning that the Pope could do nothing wrong, right? He can't sin, he doesn't make mistakes because he is the supreme representative of God on earth, right? That's the idea, and especially, priests are supposed to believe that. But Hidalgo actually challenged this idea that the Pope was infallible. Right? So he is known for challenging figures of authority. He even doubted aspects of Christian teachings, right? Which he was supposed to be teaching to the people. Ideas like the virgin birth, right? Those type of miracles. The idea that the Virgin Mary gave birth to Jesus Christ without having sex, right? The virgin birth. He doubted that idea. Right, so this man was very much a rebel priest, and he was also known to do some fornicating, meaning that he was actually having sex himself and was known to father several illegitimate children. Okay, so if you add all these details together, you start to get a picture of this man who is, technically a priest, but he is not acting like a priest normally would at this time period. So Hidalgo, who is already somewhat of a rebel, is going to end up getting in touch with other like-minded individuals, and he would start to attend secret meetings where they were discussing a number of issues, including the idea of gaining independence for New Spain from the Spanish Empire. One of these like-minded individuals that Hidalgo met was a man named Ignacio Allende. Allende was actually in the military, right? He was a captain in the Spanish military there in New Spain, but he was open to the idea of independence, right? And so there were members of the military, of the Spanish military, who were actually involved in these secret meetings, these literary clubs, quote unquote, as they were called. And at these meetings, yes, they were talking about independence. They were also talking about changes that could be made to the economy to improve the local economy. Right? And so they were meeting, under the guise of a literary club, right? Like a book club where they were going to discuss various types of literature together. But in reality, they were actually talking about an independence movement. So this is a growing independence movement that is happening in New Spain. And not just in the town of Dolores, where Father Hidalgo is operating out of, but in the whole region known as the Bajío, you have these literary clubs meeting. These secret meetings were occurring, all right, where you have individuals discussing a number of different topics, including the idea of gaining independence from Spain. So let's take a look at this map here. I could show you where the area of the Bajío is. Right here you have Guanajuato, so parts of San Luis Potosi, Valladolid. This area right here, this is the Bajío. This is where those literary meetings are taking place. This is where you find the growing movement for independence from Spain. And so also, at these secret meetings, these literary club meetings, you have discussions about how they can improve the local economy. And Father Hidalgo himself was responsible for introducing a number of new industries, such as the ceramic industry, into his local area, trying to improve the economy, trying to start jobs so that people could be involved in industry and make some money, right? Because at that time, the conditions in the Bahia were not so good for the common man, right? There were a number of problems, such as drought that had gone on for several years. And when you have drought, that means you have less rainfall, and that means the agricultural sector is going to suffer. Okay, they're not going to be able to produce as much agricultural produce as they had been before because there's not as much rain. Okay, and so what little produce they will have is actually going to be sold at a higher price. Now, you add to that the problem of inflation, which is also going on during this time. This is the period of the Bourbon reforms, and there is a period of inflation going on at this time in the early 1800s, which means that the value of currency is decreasing. All right, so that means that prices for everyday goods are actually going to be going up, right? Because it takes more money. Since the value of money is decreasing, it takes more money just to buy everyday goods. So people who are making low wages are having trouble just buying everyday products because the prices are getting so high due to inflation. Okay, and so yes, people were making low wages at this time. There was a number of individuals working, such as in the mining industry, where workers were exploited, right? They were paid very low wages for dangerous work. And so you have people who are unhappy with these local conditions. And so the fact that you have this growing independence movement in the Bahia, you're going to have a lot of individuals who are open to this idea of gaining independence from Spain because of the economic conditions. All right. And so Father Hidalgo, Ignacio Allende, and many other individuals who were involved in these literary club meetings are trying to figure out a way to improve the economy, and they're also starting to organize and plan for an independence movement. Now, finally, on September 15th, in the year of 1810, you're going to have Father Hidalgo calling for independence. He is going to have an early morning service, like really early, in the middle of the night. He's going to have a service, like a church service. And at this church service, he is going to urge individuals to fight for their freedom, to take back their country, like from the perspective of the indigenous peoples whose lands were taken by the Spanish. He's going to push them to take their land back from the Spaniards. He's calling for death to bad government, right? Such as what's going on with the Bourbon reforms, where there's such high taxes and the government is draining the local economy of silver. So he's calling for the death to bad government, and he's calling for the death of Spaniards, or gachupines, right? So he's calling for the death of Spaniards. And so this is all kind of coming from the perspective, if you think about it, from indigenous people. Because many of the individuals that Hidalgo is talking to are native people, right? As well as a mestizo population, workers in that region, such as in the mining industry. And so this is the growing independence movement happening there in the Bajío during this time period. And Hidalgo is pretty much going to set it off with his late night church service. And he's going to get everybody riled up. And after that, you're going to see the independence movement begin.